Urgent. Kyiv has held out and is preparing a devastating response. A powerful strike against Russia. The plan is already on the table. A terrifying strike on the Ukrainian capital. How did the Russians attack Kyiv? Where did they strike with Oreshnik and when will they pay for it? Meanwhile, a historic breakthrough at the front? Fierce revenge. The Ukrainian armed forces drove a steel wedge 5 kilometers deep straight into the Russian defenses near Borova. Colossal losses. On top of that, Moscow is defenseless. How did our drones' successful attacks shatter the illusion of security in the Federation? And the economy is at rock bottom. Russian oil depots are burning and even high oil prices won't save the aggressor from collapse. How will Ukraine avenge every drop of blood and finish off the dictatorship? Greetings! This is the channel Ukraine Today, about the horrific shelling of the capital and Ukraine's global revenge, right now. My name is Andrei Silakov and let's begin. Another act of animalistic terror. At night, the Russians delivered an absolutely horrific and cowardly strike on peaceful Kyiv. Driven mad by their own failures, the occupiers deliberately targeted various civilian infrastructure sites. Homes, a shopping center, a market, a recreation base, and several other locations. Trying to sow fear, the Kremlin took yet another step. They launched an Orsha missile at Bila Tserkva in the Kyiv region, but without a nuclear warhead. Apparently, to once again try to scare us and the whole world. As President Volodymyr Zelensky warned, the aggressor was preparing this combined strike. But instead of panic and submission, Russia will receive total and absolute devastating retribution.
I can tell you what will happen next. Next, the Russians will see several more places like Erupts go up in flames, and by the end of the year, attacks on Russia will become significantly larger in scale. The middle strike segment will also intensify, which will cause serious logistical problems for the occupiers. Their situation at the front will continue to deteriorate. At the same time, the Russian economy will continue to burn out, and not even temporarily high oil prices will save it. Social tensions will rise, and eventually the political system of the Russian Federation will inevitably collapse.
And this promised devastating retribution has already begun. The armed forces of Ukraine have created a real fiery hell for the occupiers right on the temporarily occupied territories. In response to the terror in Kyiv, our fighters powerfully struck the enemy's key logistics in Melitopol and blew up an oil depot in Luhansk, leaving Putin's equipment burning without critically important fuel. And this retaliatory strike is already making the Kremlin tremble with fear. Large-scale attacks by Ukrainian defense forces on targets in Moscow itself have clearly demonstrated that the much-vaunted Russian air defense system is completely ineffective. As noted by the reputable publication The Atlantic, these successful raids and the utterly pitiful scaled-down May parade have finally shattered Putin's illusion of security for both the elites and ordinary Russians. Having breached the air defenses of the aggressor's capital once, Ukraine will do it again and again. Now, by the end of the year, strikes on Russian territory will become much more large-scale, and burning oil depots like in Erupts will become a daily routine for the occupiers.
Having broken through Moscow's defenses once, Ukraine is almost certain to do it again. The author of the article warns. Experts conclude that after more than 4 years of a full-scale campaign, which the Kremlin planned to finish in 3 days, Russia has only moved further away from its goal. Ukraine is demonstrating the ability to seize the initiative and tip the scales in its favor. And the realization of this fact by Russian society only worsens Putin's position.
In addition, Ukraine is rapidly building up its deadly middle strike segment, medium-range strikes that are already tearing the enemy's logistics to shreds. The Ukrainian long-range strike campaign is overloading and destroying Russian air defense systems, opening the skies for our drones. According to experts, this strategy will lead to massive logistical problems, leaving the occupiers' frontline units without very important resources. Russian logistics are turning to ashes, and with them any hopes of the occupation command to hold on to captured positions are burning away as well. And while the enemy's rear is engulfed in flames, the Ukrainian armed forces are delivering a crushing blow right on the front line. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian forces carried out a brilliant mechanized counterattack in the Kharkiv region toward Borova, breaking through the Russian defenses as far as 5 kilometers deep. With the support of at least 15 armored vehicles, our defenders struck powerfully at the forward positions of Russia's 20th Combined Arms Army, while the enemy was frantically trying to regroup. Having believed in their own exaggerated reports of success near Kupiansk, the Russian command failed to anticipate this breakthrough, and now a state of absolute panic reigns in their ranks.
Russian military bloggers have confirmed that at least 15 armored vehicles participated in the Ukrainian mechanized offensive near Mariivka, Lozov, and Volchy Yar, which are all situated southeast of Borova. A Kremlin-linked Russian blogger reported that Ukrainian vehicles may have successfully advanced and penetrated up to 5 kilometers into Russian-controlled territory before Russian forces struck the Ukrainian vehicles. Russia has acknowledged that Ukrainian forces are operating in Andriivka, Redkodub, Volchye Yar, and the southwest of Karpivka, all southeast of Borova.
This phenomenal breakthrough is being achieved by the incredible rate at which enemy personnel are being destroyed. In just the last 24 hours, Putin's army has suffered a loss of 1,110 servicemen. Ukrainian soldiers have destroyed 61 artillery systems, a total of nearly 300 vehicles, and about 2,000 tactical drones. Russia still cannot stop the advance of the powerful Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Highly exaggerated public statements by Russian officials about their success in Kupiansk allow Ukrainian forces to exploit vulnerable weak points in Russia's defensive line that the Russian military command has ignored, as several military experts have recently noted.
Alongside the total military defeat, the Russian economy is also rapidly sinking to the bottom. Experts state that even temporarily high oil prices are no longer able to save the budget of the aggressor country from inevitable collapse. Western analysts draw direct parallels with militarist Japan during World War II, where concealing actual losses led to the collapse of the government. The political system of the Russian Federation is doomed, and its inevitable fall is only a matter of time.
Social tension will continue to grow. Sooner or later, the political system of the Russian Federation will collapse. There will still be convulsions in the form of possible attacks on the EU or attempts at mobilization. But overall, Vladimir Putin buried Russia back on February 20th, 2014 when he started the war against Ukraine.
And while our forces are powerfully striking enemy targets, economic pressure on the Kremlin must only increase. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that all sanctions must continue to be enforced. After all, any concession to Moscow undermines global security. See how our partners have assessed Ukraine's latest successes in the following report.
Kyiv's partners note the strengthening of Ukraine's position both on the battlefield and as a result of successful strikes on military factories and logistical hubs deep inside Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky officially stated this following a video conference with French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The allies also discussed preparations for peace talks with European participation, notes Volodymyr Zelensky.
This is significant, and it is precisely this kind of pressure from us that can push towards the right and effective diplomacy. It has been mutually agreed that our national security advisors will meet in the very near future. Our intelligence teams will collaborate to exchange available information in significantly greater detail. We also discuss communication with the American side. We are doing everything to achieve a true peace. Glory to Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Since the beginning of the year, Ukraine's defense forces have liberated 590 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory from Russian occupiers, stated Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukrainian long-range strikes are also demonstrating high effectiveness. For example, on May 23rd, the Security Service of Ukraine struck the Metafrax Chemicals chemical plant in the Perm region. The defense forces of Ukraine are also delivering effective strikes against Russia's oil and gas industry, the head of state emphasizes.
I thank the armed forces of Ukraine. They continue to respond justly against facilities of the Russian oil industry. These include Novorossiysk, the oil terminal, and oil transshipment facilities. And it is true that Russia is losing export revenues from oil. It is precisely thanks to oil and gas that Russia has become so arrogant, allowing itself to wage war in the modern world and continue threatening everyone else. It is necessary for all forms of sanctions against Russia and its accomplices to continue working. And every weakening of sanctions also undermines global security and delays peace.
Experts note that Russia does not have real military or strategic resources to intensify escalation. At the same time, Kyiv's partners are helping to expand Ukraine's long-range capabilities. Defense Express has calculated that this year 10 drone manufacturing plants will open across Europe. Analysts are confident that the Kremlin's chances of winning a war of attrition are diminishing.
A significant and growing number of drones that are being used to strike targets within the Russian Federation are either partially or fully manufactured and assembled, including those built on European territory. Russia is well aware of this reality, but is essentially powerless in this matter, because striking the territory of European countries would mean declaring a full-scale war on NATO, something Russia is simply not prepared for today. Given the gravity of these current circumstances, we see that the Kremlin is essentially refusing to acknowledge the geopolitical reality, because by refusing any meaningful dialogue with Europe, Russia is only prolonging its own long-term decline, both economically and in terms of its massive military expenditures.
We are at a turning point in the war when Russian manpower is no longer a decisive advantage, wrote Ukraine's foreign minister on social network X. A new impetus is needed in peace efforts, along with the strengthening of special long-term sanctions and other levers of influence, the diplomat believes.
We are at war.
We need to move to a new format of negotiations with the Russian side. There are two possible approaches here. The more active one involves the participation of the European side. The second is a meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Putin. We believe that it is precisely a meeting between Zelensky and Putin that could bring concrete results. And not just progress, but an additional impetus to end the war, specifically to end the war.
Against the backdrop of Western aid to Ukraine and improvements for it on the front lines, the Russian dictator Putin may reconsider his calculations and decide not to continue the war. This was stated by Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. Earlier, he also suggested that if Putin still had the option to resort to serious escalation, he would have done so. But there are hardly any options left. Andriy Dmitrenko for Freedom TV channel.
And such powerful pressure is already bearing its destructive fruit. According to our foreign intelligence, due to inflation and a shortage of people, up to a third of all companies in Russia may be shutting down. Why the Kremlin no longer has money for repairs and how the entire infrastructure in the country is collapsing en masse. Watch in our report.
Wow, it really is just so incredibly beautiful. Absolutely.
The systemic crisis in Russia's housing and utilities sector has become a year-round phenomenon, as the actual wear and tear of heating systems, water pipelines and power grids in several regions has reached a critical 40 to 80%. The Soviet infrastructure has completely exhausted its resources, and its renewal cannot keep up with the pace of destruction.
For example, in the village of Maloye Bazilikovoye in the Kaliningrad region, they solved the garbage problem in the most high-tech way possible. Waste, a significant portion of which is plastic, is simply buried in a pit by the roadside. A country that has spent years boasting of its greatness and development is, in practice, reverting to primitive methods of disposal. Voronezh was once again left without water due to yet another utility accident, while Novokuznetsk was practically paralyzed after an accident, without electricity, heat, water, or sewage. From a statement by the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service,
In Engels, Saratov region, nearly 200,000 people were left without water due to an accident at the collector. The city's sewage system has not been working for the second week. Drinking water is being delivered by special vehicles, but there isn't enough for everyone.
There you go. Everything is flooded.
After pumping out the sewage, it was necessary to disinfect the courtyards. The utility collapse is caused by a lack of funding, since all the Federation's money is going to the war. Against the backdrop of a record state budget deficit, decisions are being made to privatize enterprises. Thus, the Russian authorities are planning to sell almost a quarter of Aeroflot's shares in order to at least partially cover the hole in the federal budget. The sale is expected to bring in about 45 million rubles, but this will not solve the systemic problem, according to Russian media.
the Federal Agency for State Property Management has announced the selection of an organizer to sell nearly 24% of Aeroflot's shares, the national air carrier whose services are used by more than 50 million passengers annually. The money from the privatization will go to the federal budget, which this year has a deficit of 3.8 trillion rubles. At the same time, by the end of April, the actual hole in the treasury had already exceeded the annual plan by more than 1.5 times. From an article by the Moscow Times.
Currently, the state controls 73% of the airline's shares. After the deal, the share will drop exactly to the minimum controlling stake. Independent economists note that this investment will turn out to be unprofitable for the budget. In October 2020, the state bought these shares at 60 rubles each as part of government support during the pandemic, but now on the stock exchange they are worth about 47 rubles per share. The loss is estimated at 12 billion rubles. Analysts note that this is one of the largest attempts at privatizing state-owned companies in Russia in recent times.
This deal might be of significant interest to the close personal associates of Vladimir Putin, and it could indicate a very serious and credible opportunity for a ceasefire in the region. This is because only a truly foolish investor would decide to purchase shares in Aeroflot if it is assumed that the ongoing war will continue for a significantly long period of time. It increasingly appears to me that the noose around the neck of the Russian economy, and therefore around Putin's neck as well, is gradually tightening more and more.
The European Union should not ease sanctions against Russia, even in the face of shortages of certain resources, including due to the situation in the Middle East, which is affecting oil prices. This was stated by the Minister of Economic Affairs and Communications of Estonia ahead of the meeting of the EU Council of Ministers for Economy and Trade in Brussels. In the short term,
Even if in the short term we experience a significant shortage of various essential resources, this absolutely and unequivocally means that we cannot ease any sanctions. We cannot reduce or diminish any measures regarding Russia, because we cannot simply replace one dependency with another. This means that Europe urgently needs to take more decisive action. If we are moving towards sanctions, in my opinion, we should continue to tighten them further. We need to carefully consider where we can further increase the cost of war for the Russian Federation itself. It's not about replacing one dependency with another. It's about how we can manage our internal affairs in Europe and how we can truly demonstrate to the world our collective strength and influence.
experts claim that Russia's economy is close to the limit of its capabilities. Production capacities are almost exhausted, the labor shortage has reached its highest levels, and civilian sectors are experiencing a downturn. That is why there is less and less money for the military-industrial complex. To continue the war against Ukraine, the Kremlin will be forced to take unpopular measures, including a new mobilization, closing the borders, abolishing civil liberties, and shifting to a Soviet-style command economy. This forecast is given by the London International Institute for Strategic Studies. According to analysts, the influx of new contract soldiers since last December does not cover the losses at the front. Therefore, most likely, Russia will introduce restrictions on freedom of movement and on leaving the country. Victoria Chistyukina for Freedom TV channel.
And while the Russian economy and infrastructure are rapidly collapsing, the West is completely blocking any escape routes for the Kremlin. Brussels has already made it clear there will be no easing of oil sanctions, even despite the rise in global fuel prices. How exactly does Europe plan to finally deprive the aggressor of its main sources of income? Watch this. The ministers of economy and trade of the European Union gathered in Brussels for a meeting of the Foreign Trade Council. Despite the rise in energy prices amid the situation in the Middle East, European ministers are sending a clear signal. They do not intend to ease the pressure on Moscow. So what is
The direct and undeniable connection of any economic activity with Russia is that it directly fuels and sustains their military economy, kills Ukrainians, and deliberately attempts to create new threats at our borders, specifically at the borders of the eastern flank. But if this affects any single country of the European Union, it inevitably affects and impacts the entire Union as a whole. Thus, in our collective understanding of this issue, there is a dark side, and we should not link this to our own economic vulnerability. We can find a way to obtain oil from different sources. In fact, there are many different options available.
The government in Stockholm maintains a similar stance as well. Sweden is not only firmly opposed to easing sanctions, but also insists on further tightening them, especially regarding Russia's revenues from energy exports.
Sweden will seek to further strengthen sanctions against Russia. We will continue to provide comprehensive support to Ukraine and consistently exert the maximum possible pressure on the Russian economy. We know that Moscow has significantly boosted its financial revenues as a result of events in the Middle East, and I believe that a much smaller number of European nations should import products from Russia. Therefore, we will fully support any and all sanctions and take the toughest possible stance toward the Russian Federation.
Warsaw fully supports this line of reasoning. The Polish side is actively highlighting the paradox. The growth of Moscow's oil revenues is effectively compelling Europeans to simultaneously increase their own security spending. That is why, according to the Polish representative, EU unity on the issue of sanctions is more important today than economic considerations.
Right now, I see a certain unity within the European Union. Again, we are talking about the money that Russia could use against us and against Europe. Thus, by earning a little more, perhaps due to higher oil prices, we would at the same time be forced to spend more and limit ourselves. And in doing so, we would weaken our own security, which is the most important thing and the highest priority for all Europeans.
Brussels is delivering a clear message to Moscow. Neither turbulence in the energy markets nor rising oil prices will be a reason to reevaluate the current sanctions policy. Vitaly Sizov, Ruslan Kusko from Brussels for Freedom TV channel.
What do you think about the latest events? Comment below, give us a like, and stay updated with the latest news. There's more to come.